And it was on this day, November 14th in 2021, we're getting to the end of the year ever so slowly, that I finished book An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon, which I read for school. And I do want to say two things right off the bat. First, this is going to be super fast because I actually don't have a lot that I feel like I can say confidently on this book, because I ended up speeding through the end because I was actually like a few days behind like the deadline we're supposed to finish it. Oops. So I kind of just put it on like I got the audiobook after like 2 weeks of waiting, and I put it on 1.75 speed and just went zooming. So I kind of feel bad for like not having the most to say about it, and not being able to really dig into a lot of the important themes and stuff in the background, because there's definitely a lot going on here, and it's a really good academic read. I just was reading 2 other books for other classes at the same time, so that overlap made me forget a lot of what happens, and I feel bad. I'm sorry. So yeah, I also did not write down notes for this because I was like, it'll be quick, and I have to go write my paper in a few minutes, so it's also gonna be quick because of that. So I guess a lot of the things, non-spoiler wise, to say about this book is I don't want to say I love, but I like how notable the themes on like class and how class and society can like separate from like individuality with sexuality or gender or some form of identity, religion, how all these things can be like separate and not like just one-sided. A lot of the other readings we had this year in this class was very one-sided. It's like society is this way. Society is this way. Or it's like one character against society. But in this book, you could tell that there's like different societies in the big society kind of thing. So I don't know if that makes sense. And it's not like rare to find that. It's just we haven't had it in the readings this year, so I wanted to mention it. But this book for sure had that like variety, like there's differences between people, and it's perfectly normal, it happens, kind of thing. This was the first, if you don't count Mrs. Dalloway, we just exclude Mrs. Dalloway because I did not understand that book at all. Exclude that one. This is the first book I have ever read, technically, that had a theme on sexuality and gender, because I've never read any other book about that. You could argue Journeyer, but it's not like this. Like, Journeyer is all about how cultures are different, and Marco is like learning that some people's cultures are all about men, and he flips out about that. He's kind of homophobic in a way, for sure. But in this book, it's like, it's Mabel and Pippi is what I want to say is their names, but like they're evidently a couple, and then there's a bunch of discussion, especially with Theo. I love Theo. Theo's probably my favorite character. A lot of discussion with Theo about how he doesn't feel like he's what he's called, and he kind of presents himself differently, stuff like that. And there's some like an epiphany later that the main character Aster has. It's interesting. It's not like too overdone or like in the face or anything like that, like TV shows tend to do nowadays, but it's kind of like slow going. It's especially like contrast against class, like they would get beat up for doing that kind of thing. It's wrong, but they do it anyway because it's how they feel and how they are, kind of thing. Wrong, we should say. Definitely interesting. So yeah. And then in general, the other thing I loved about this book is I love myself some mysteries. It gives me a lot of nostalgia now anytime I read a mystery book. This isn't technically mystery, this is a sci-fi, very sci-fi book, but it had that mystery element. It's like Aster is like going through a journey to uncover truths of something to obtain a goal. And so over the course of the story, she's like figuring out like a puzzle. And I love reading most books that have that. So a lot of the like reveals and epiphanies that have to do with that puzzle are actually really, really like, I'm sorry if you can hear the wind. I want to say fun, but it's not fun. It's like, I have no idea what that sound was. Addicting? It's not quite the right word, but we'll just go with like addicting. It like draws you in more, in my opinion. It drew me in more is what I should say. So, but I definitely liked that element. And also space. Space is cool. I like how sciencey Aster is. It's kind of hard to like understand her perspective of the world a lot of the time, but in the end it's so definitively Aster. It's like, it's her. You know that it's just part of who she is. You kind of just get used to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like a strong characterization point, and you just get used to it as part of her. So, yeah. Favorite character, as I said, it's probably Theo. I do really like Theo. A lot of the themes that come with Theo, like just how he was treated as a character, as a plot device. Not really. I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean like how he interacted with the plot with Aster. It's like helping, but like not directly a part of it kind of thing. It's very interesting. He brings a lot of the conflicts, but he's not the bad guy at all. He's a good guy who's bringing a lot of the conflicts inadvertently, but then it kind of goes that way. That is really loud, I'm sorry. Weather's not liking us today. So. And if I did choose a least favorite character, it's probably Giselle. I just don't like her. When we got in her perspective, I'm just like, what is going on here? It's so confusing. So yeah, favorite thing about the book, I probably have to go with like the kind of mystery aspect, like the way the conflicts and stuff arise. Something seemingly come out of nowhere, and I really like when that happens. And then there's other things that like you could kind of see coming, but the way you sink into it, there's a lot of suspense in this book, and I like that. The thing I like the least is probably gonna be, I'll explain why. It's probably gonna have to be with like flashback things that take up like a 40-minute chapter. There's like 3 or so like 50-minute chapters in this book, and they are long. I just having a chapter that drawn out is one thing for it to start off with. I struggle being able to read a chapter that's more than like 23 pages. So once you get past that, it's hard to keep my attention for that whole chapter, which is a me thing, but it's definitely a thing. When it's an audiobook, it feels so non-stop. It goes forever and ever and ever and ever. The specific scenario I'm thinking of, not technically a spoiler, but it's kind of digging into the actual book. There's this entire series of flashbacks that are all about like playing house or like playing roles, and it's just Giselle and Aster playing these roles, and it just goes through all these different scenarios of roles they went through back to back to back to back to back to back to back quite a few times with a bunch of different cases. And then it will do like some like in the past flashback thing that doesn't have to do with the storytelling, but it has to do with something that could link to the present, and then they go back to the past again. It just felt really drawn out, and I kind of was tempted to skip it. I didn't. I stuck with it. But that was definitely the part of the book that, like, every time I look back at it, I'm like, this was hard to listen to a little bit. Just a little bit. So, it's probably my least favorite thing. Not too much of like a criticism, but just it was there. That's really all I have to say about that. But yeah. Spoilers wise, cutting it here. Spoilers. You have time to leave. I'm not really gonna say that much about spoilers, but Theo with his identity. Again, I really like that. The fact that he like is an upper class person, but at the same time he has like some of the traits of middle class or has some of the beliefs of low class. He's like it's like amalgamation of, I don't mean that like in a negative way. First of all, I love him, but like it's this weird combination of all the different classes, and he has his own beliefs, his own perspectives, his like own like realization of his identity, and kind of his own version of the same religion. It's kind of weird, but like the fact that he also just abandons his religion when he like realizes like what his, I want to say, uncle is actually doing after he became sovereign. So he's such a round character. He's like changing all the time, in like fluctuating. He's definitely not static is what I'm basically saying. And he's just a very human for a character. I like him. To me, he's like a really human person character. So yeah, he has this like level of power to him that gives Aster like a bunch of advantages throughout the story, but Aster keeps keeping truths from him, so he's helping blindly. I think that was also an interesting dynamic between those two characters. I like when Aster has the line, and I remember it, I'm a girl, a boy, and a witch. Like, all three. Because she has, like, her moment where she realizes that after Theo admits that he doesn't feel like he's a guy. And that's, of course, like, you know, when they're finally are like, okay, I guess we like each other. I'm not much of a romantic plot person, but this one wasn't too in the face. In fact, it was actually the opposite. It's like a Harry Murphy situation, if you know Dresden Files, where they're like ignoring it, or they like don't believe in it even though it's there, kind of thing. So interesting. A lot of the before I get to that, the scene that probably caught me onto the novel, even though it's actually a ways in, I think it's like chapter 5 or 6, 4, 5, 6, it's in there. But the scene where they're in the fields doing like their tasks with the guard guy, like giving them commands, telling them to hold steady, and then there's a blackout in this rotating thing. There's a blackout while they're in this rotating thing. The rotation stops and everyone gets like flung, and then one of the tool closets was open, and so tools came flying out, and like one hit Aster in the back and like gave her like a huge cut in the back. That was the scene that like caught me onto the book, in terms of like I felt there was like something to be excited for coming up. Like there's suddenness to this book. There's things happening. I'm ready. Let's get going. We're like stepping up the speed a bit. So that's always fun. Again with unpredictable moments, but a lot more unpredictable. Like when the guy smashed Aster's hand, I was like, okay, damn, we're like, this is escalating. First there's the execution. I did not expect Flick to be the execution. I thought it was going to be Mabel, or I want to say Pippi. I don't want to mess it up. I thought they were going to be the one executed, but it turns out they weren't. It was Flick, which is sad as hell. Rip. But like starting there, it just escalated very quickly with what was going on with Aster and Giselle. I was really worried about Giselle for a long bit there, that she was like gonna shoot herself. Was concerned. the entire fight, when they had the rifle, I was worried that the rifle's accidentally going to shoot someone. It got very intense, is basically what I'm saying, and it kept me in the book with how, like, worried I was for the characters. And I usually love that in the book, so there's that. And then the last thing I'll say about sudden surprises, it's not as sudden, but again, the reveals with Loon, the fact that it's code, and they're saying, like, Loon is, like, L-Deck is damaged, they're talking about, like, herself, and all that stuff, it's all written in code, and then they get up there, and it turns out she has, like, all these formulas and math and stuff, which is awesome. Just saying. And all this talk of, like, how she found out about Eidolon? I think it's Eidolon? I just finished this book today and I already don't remember, I'm sorry. But, like, the metal that poisoned the previous sovereign, and Loon herself, we think? Did we figure that out? I don't know if we... I remember a bit where they were like, Loon survived, but she got up here, kind of thing. Ooh, I'm about to feel guilty, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Ignoring, like, the demise of Loon, just in general, like, all the reveals of, like, she had this secret room, she found out all these things, the radiolab gets triggered by the things, and it turns out that the blackouts aren't because of some damage or anything, but actually because the ship is, like, redirecting itself, which makes so much sense, honestly, in the end. I like when things make sense, but aren't predictable. So, yeah, it was very interesting, and of course, I love the storytelling in the book. A lot of the questions we talked about in class is why the author did, like, Once Upon a Time and those kinds of storytelling things. But there's a bunch of, like, fairy tales that aren't fairy tales, but, like, their version of sci-fi future fairy tales, where it's like, the raven comes in and goes down and gets swallowed by the guy and, like, pecks him out on the inside, and then the raven flies out and, like, won his victory or whatever. Like, very weird stories. There was the weirdest story I've heard in my life in there. It's a crazy story. Believe me. But I think in the end, a lot of those aspects was, like, it does parallel to our stories. It's just the stories of another society. And it's kind of evident that it's, like, different but the same. And I don't think that was the author's, like, why she did it, but it's what I noticed was that, like, every time Aster takes away a key theme from a story, I can recognize that we do that. We take away a key theme. The one key theme where she's like, the key theme of this story is probably to just never have children. I'm like, I'll be honest, that was funny to me. But I don't know, a lot of those stories are very interesting, and it reminds me of, I'll try not to spoil it because it's very, very spoiler-based thing, but it reminds me of the character at the end of Hero of Ages in the Mistborn trilogy. Like, the end of Hero of Ages in Mistborn trilogy, where stories come back and stories are super important. That's all I'll say there. It reminds me of that. Like, they start their journey back to Earth at the end of this book, and stories kind of become important because they're going back to where they have all these stories of a previous time with, like, a greenhouse planet called Earth. So, I don't know. I think it's interesting, for sure. That's most of what I have to say. I wish I could say more. There's definitely a lot more to analyze, and I sped through a lot of it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Sadly, there actually isn't a lot of, like, academia written on this novel because it's so new. And a lot of the academia that is written on it is not really what I'm interested in analyzing. So in class, when we were talking about finding analytical articles on this book, none of them just stuck with me, and I really want to see, like, good analysis of this book be written. But haven't seen any yet. And not on gender and sexuality, which is kind of what I want to see. But, oh well. Maybe in the future. One day. What am I reading right now? That is a good question. I'll be right back. I am currently reading, if it would load, if it would really like to load, ideally not on something inappropriate. It'll make sense why in a second. I don't know why Malice is trending, but Malice is trending. Back to the beginning. So this is the last reading I have for the same class. It's Fun Home by Bechdel. If you've heard of the Bechdel test, it's the same Bechdel. It's a graphic novel that is very blunt, so that's why I was concerned about it opening on something bad, is because this novel, it's graphic novel. You're gonna see what she's talking about, and sometimes that's not really what you want to see. So yeah, but I'm currently at 65%. It actually goes by really fast, so I should be finishing it soon, and I will actually do a review on the graphic novel because there's definitely a lot to it. This also has a lot of gender and sexuality in it, which is also cool. So this is the second book I've ever had with a theme on that. I love that I've had them both for this class. I never would have expected that. Ever. Would not expect it. But I love that's happening. So, we're living for it. There's definitely some questionable things said in this book. I'm not going to say there aren't questionable things said in this book, because there are. I'm somewhat sure that it's because of the time period the book takes place in. But it also just might be iffy definitions of things. I honestly don't know. I guess I'll look back on it when I finish it, but I'm currently reading this. When I finish this, I will finally, I've been waiting for so long, start Castle of Wizardry. I want to so bad. I'm so excited. So, we'll start Castle of Wizardry, and then during Thanksgiving break, which is this coming weekend, it's Thanksgiving break, I have to read this book because it's due in December. So, nod. I need to read this book during Thanksgiving break, so I will be reading that soon. It's only 1,800 pages. It'll be fine. There's gonna be some speed reading going on there. It's gonna be very iffy. So, those are the books I have going on. Believe me, Castle Wizardry is going to go by fast because I've been wanting to listen to this forever, but I had to finish Unkindness of Ghosts. So, I'm so excited. It is 15.5 hours though, so maybe it won't go as fast as I claim, but I think it'll go by. So, very soon. Whoopsie, I dropped it. So, yeah, I don't own any new books. Yeah, I don't own any new books per se. I lied. I don't remember if I showed that last video. I'll just say I got Books of Blood by Clive Barker. I do not plan to read it ever. I'm probably going to give it to my sister. It's not that it's like the author or anything, because I'm sure Clive Barker is an amazing author. But I just don't like horror or thriller. Like, thriller, horror-like thriller. I just don't like it. Reading it, watching it, anything. So I'm just gonna give it to my sister, who loves horror, thriller, and all that. Stephen King and all that. It's just not what I read. So, I got that book, but I don't have plans for it. Again, I'm sure he's a good author. I just don't think it's my taste. Maybe I'll try it one day, but I doubt it. And that should be everything. So now I'm going to finish my math problem and type my essay. Bye-bye.